All right, welcome into Night Moods, and I'm gonna get through my voice. This is part one of a multi-part series, and you're watching on live streaming as well as Night Moods HQ podcast. So thank you for joining me, especially on the live stream. So across all the platforms of 126 Genesis Media and Night Moods HQ is where you're actually listening to this I don't know, multi-part series before I go on the radio show in about 45 minutes or so. Um, this has kind of been in the planning, and you're gonna go on a journey, and it's hoping that I can bring you into how to cope when the love bridge implodes, is destroyed. And that love bridge connects marriages and relationships. So I'm talking about marriages because I have been on this crisis journey since the beginning of this year. And so I'm going to share my story a little bit. And tomorrow I hope to have a guest speaker on with me to kind of talk about how to handle for yourself um, when your marriage implodes or your relationship implodes. And I'm going to talk about the bridge. And before I talk about the bridge, I thought I had this with me, but let me grab this outside the studio. Really kind of cool. Now, this is kind of off the cuff here. I should have had this with me before, but bear with me here on the podcast. Had to run out the studio just to grab this. I thought I had it with me. I looked to my right and didn't have the books. Now, going to be helping you deal with marriages and relationships that are shattered. And I'm going to utilize my journey through the last 3.5 weeks and give you some techniques, some tips, some resources, how to help you if you are in a relationship that is um, doing the Titanic, or it didn't do a Titanic. Crisis popped up and your spouse walked out on you. This is what happened to me. And so I've been reeling, dealing, grieving, mourning. I have been in denial. I have been through acceptance, even gone through anger, having no questions, no answers. And it's interesting coming up because this is probably one of the better weeks I've had. And getting back to work, I stepped aside from the business. I stepped aside from the ministry, from the churches. With my stepping aside, it was to step down because I don't want to be a hypocrite. I don't want to be teaching and serving, and my world has crashed, and I couldn't manage and maintain my house. So I got back from Colorado early Monday morning. Early Monday morning. I was a weekend getaway to just kind of be devoid of this area. And so got into Fort Collins, and the mountains were like right there. So my cousin, and I'm like, man, let me just, can I just go for a walk, and can I just kind of veg out here? And he's like, man, do what you got to do. And so I got to walk around and realizing that life goes on. Life is never on a pause, and life being the environment, the atmosphere, the territory, the organic nature of God's creation. And for me, that's his creation, whether it's the ocean, the sea, the lakes, the rivers, the stream, or the mountains. That's where I find my solitude. So I'm going to do something a little different on the podcast tonight. And it's nighttime. It is night moods. I'm in the lab with you for a little bit because this is a multi-part series. I thought it was going to be a 2-part series, but depending on the guests I'm looking to line up over the next couple of episodes to help bring this to the foundation to help you. And so before we start, now, We're on live stream, so you can see me on the YouTube. I'm going to do a giveaway. Now, I'm going to give this book away. Actually, there's two books. One's a devotional from our supporters at Voice of the Martyrs, Extreme Devotion, 365-day devotional stories of ancient to modern day believers who sacrifice everything for Christ. This is 377 pages of devotions, everyday devotions that you can utilize for all of 2023. I can't wait for 2023 to be over with. Get me to 2024. I'll be happy. But for those of you watching on the live stream and listening, now you're listening on a podcast, and when this replay comes, they're going to be all out. So what I'm getting at is this. At the end of tonight's episode, in episode 2, because this is going to be a series that I'm going to be doing on marriage relationships shattered, I'm going to give you an email, and I want you to write the email down. The name of the book is called Extreme Devotion. Now, for the first 10 people that email me, we're going to put this devotional book in your hands. Now, you have to be here in the United States or Puerto Rico so that you can get this free book and a accompaniment book, which is called the Life Book, from our partners at Voice of the Martyrs, as our way of saying thank you. But before I get started, I want to make sure I give you the email. It's nightmoodshdq@gmail.com. Make sure I got everything turned down here in the studio. Nightmoodshdq@gmail.com is where you can put in a subject, Extreme Devotion. I gotta just put that in the subject. You're watching the live stream, put that in the subject. Now, if you listen to the podcast, unless you're on the live stream or you're participating with me right now on Clubhouse, Instagram, LinkedIn, I think we're everywhere on 126 Genesis Media, but put in the subject matter, Extreme Devotion, and the first 10 emails that we get during this episode, we're going to make sure that we get this book into your hands. It is a free book. The Life Book is a smaller book, and the smaller book runs over a little over 100 pages. You can see the book right here. And I'm going to do my best to keep us on task tonight. So that's going to be the free giveaway. The first 10 individuals here in the United States and or Puerto Rico, you send an email to nightmoodshdq@gmail.com, and that's NITEMOODZ HDQ@gmail.com. You're going to get a free book as a way of saying thank you for listening to this special episode. And last but not least, I think we're ready to do this. We ready to do this? All right, let me get back myself situated here inside the lab, and you're here with me. Things are blowing up around, but that's okay. Night Moods is brought to you in part by our friends at Logos Bible Software. Logos combines digital books with intelligent software to help you study the Bible deeply. Do word studies with one click, search for virtually anything in your Bible, and enjoy dozens of features that help you see Scripture clearly. It's like having a personal Bible study research assistant. Now, click the link in this description of this episode to get your copy of Logos 10. And during this episode, I actually will be utilizing Logos 10. Been a partner with Logos 10 for over, now I can say 12 years. And it's excellent. If you are a theologian, if you just like to study the scriptures, this content, this software will help you immensely. That's all I'm going to say. So in the description, click on a link, get your copy. As my way of saying thank you for supporting Night Moods HQ. So we're going to get into it. Now, those free 10 books for the first 10 people that email the show, nightmoodshdq@gmail.com. We are live streaming across all the 126 Genesis Media platforms, including Clubhouse, Wisdom, LinkedIn, YouTube, the Facebooks. I think we're all over the place. So we got that handled. Let's go on a journey, and I'm going to help. Two-part series for now. We could go a little bit longer. but the deal in these episodes is to help you how to cope when the love bridge has been destroyed. People are actually emailing. This is really kind of interesting. I'm going to see if Chris can man the email so I can stay focused here. Excuse me, my voice is out of whack, and I'm normally drinking tea when I'm on the radio or even on the podcast, which is kind of what helps getting everything clear in my throat. January 4th, my love bridge exploded. My love bridge exploded. Didn't see it coming. January 3rd, I came home. My wife and I owned a very small cleaning business. On top of obligations, responsibilities, and as church founder to NMFC, Foresight Ministries International, the new media company, 126 Genesis Media, the radio station, and the podcast, and all of this. It's just been a blessing. Came home. As we all have our stories and our marriages. This is a 10-year marriage this year. 10 years. I've known Jill since 1987. Jill's an awesome woman to me, beautiful woman. I have zero answers, and I'm doing this because my first week back to work, I told the leadership I'll be coming back Monday, and I've come back to headaches and stacks of papers and emails and messages, and it was just like everybody put everybody on pause because everybody was just unknown and unsure if I was ever going to come back to the church. And God had to speak to me on the 14th of January. And that for me was the burden that was lifted off of me, dealing with the unanswered questions and leaving the house. I want to say thank you to everyone who has been here at the chateau. I call our house the chateau because it's our parsonage, it's our peace, our sanctuary. And God has placed individuals in my pathway to just be there as I dipped into the cave because I did not want to walk up this mountain anymore. It became too much of a challenge. And some of you are listening, watching, you know what I'm talking about. When you have responsibilities, family responsibilities, children, your marriage, there's that immediate responsibility. And then you have your vocation or your employment, whatever it is that you're doing, or if you're a student, it doesn't really matter. But your first obligations are to you, yourself, your family. When I'm talking about you, yourself, I'm talking about yourself and God. So this is to help you. Came home January 3rd after working one of our commercial accounts, cleaning. And just an ordinary night. January 3rd was the day after New Year's, because Monday everything was closed down. So we had a job that switched from Monday to Tuesday. Now, I came out of consecration right before New Year's. And I knew that when I entered consecration before Christmas, it wouldn't go well with the family because it's been a few years since I've had this high level of a consecration. My wife would normally think I'm alienating from her, but no, this is simply me and Papa, me getting deep in him to understand more about me, more about this journey, my responsibilities, and to just undress me before him. So we have on the other side of the studio, we have our war room down here. The studio is in our home, this blessed home. So on the other side of the basement is our war room, our secret place where we go in and just spend time with the Lord. I like to spend time here in the studio. And it was audio listening, reading scriptures, just studying it. And Father told me he was taking me back to where I was when I was in Morocco. So there's kind of the timeline to me just as we cross over the bridge of love back and forth, to and fro, handling our business here as you are handling your business there. And I was so unaware. When I came home Tuesday night, it was about around 9-ish, a little after 9, because I just, my wife and I, we weren't talking as much. And that was one of our major problems. We just never have time to have a conversation with the last of our 6 blended kids here at the house. Miss Kira. So Jill's upstairs watching, I think Netflix or something like that. What I did was got home, washed the van because I make sure the van has to look good, so that whether Jill's driving it or I'm driving it, that's just me. From I used to own a auto detail center, so the van's got to stay clean. Did the van, stopped by the grocery store on my way home from the cleaning one of our accounts, brought the stuff in, cleaned the van. Jill was really quiet, didn't say much, and I'm sitting there thinking about this today when I was cleaning. I'm like, wait, I came home. We didn't have a conversation. I told her there. I went and got some groceries. Had to fly downstairs, get ready for Night Moods, the radio show that I host on Monday through Fridays. Did the show. Everything was okay. A little kind of weird thing because normally Jill listens to the radio show, but she hasn't been listening to the radio show for the last couple of days here. She goes to bed. I'm doing the show for a couple hours. Come get off the show, speaking to a couple of ministers, and kind of getting myself into 2023. Had to get to bed, did all that, woke up the next morning. Normally I'm in the bed, I don't know, 4:30, 5 o'clock morning once I get down, talking to our ministers and working what I need to work on to close off the end of the day, to begin the next day. And I felt an uneasiness in the spirit. And I got up a little earlier than I normally would get up because I know I had to handle a couple of things. And this was about 11:38 in the morning. And, I'm hearing the garage door go up and down. And I'm like, okay, that's weird. But, the girls are always moving around anyway. So I got up and, I'm just kind of getting my thoughts together. And I see Jill and Kira look at me shocked because I'm up. And I'm like, okay, I'm up. And they're bolting for the door, the garage door. And the fear in her eyes, and she looked at Kira and just yelled at Kira, run, get in the van. I'm like, what is going on? Now, totally oblivious to what is happening to my world. And it is at this moment imploding. And this is my wake up to January 4th, which happened to be Kira's 13th birthday. And she's the last of our 6 kids. There's from 31 down to 26, going on 27, and then we have our gap with Kira. And so I'm out in my towel in the garage, like, why are you guys like running to the van and what's going on? Jill and I don't ever fight. We have arguments, but we never fight. Jill has, I've known her since 87. She has, because we got reunited, she came through 24 years of an abusive, psychotic, crazy, extreme marriage for 24 years. And everything that was, you could imagine, was done to my Jill. And so these last 3 weeks, I have been in and out, having to meet with other individuals. Hey, where's Jill? Blah, blah, blah. And so it's kind of like the first thing on my mouth is, hi, my name is Michael. My wife has left me. So on the 4th of January, Jill is peeling out of the driveway up the cul-de-sac, and she's gone. And I'm sitting there realizing she's not going to the store. Like, she left. But the weird thing about this whole situation was that she didn't take anything out of the house. So it led me to believe, like, okay, she's gonna maybe she's going to her mom and dad's to go visit, or they're doing I don't know what they're doing. So I came back in and just got my thoughts together and looked at the table, and there was all of our bills, because Jill was the accountant for the church, the ministry, the business, and the family. She did all of the accounting stuff. I'm looking at the bills, and she's got this is due, this is due. So I'm like, okay, I'm like, hold up, wait a minute. This is like her way of saying goodbye, I suppose. So I'm like, look, getting dressed, go back in the bedroom. I'm realizing, like, the closet, her side of the walk-in closet, half the stuff is still there, like her personal effects. And then she grabbed her big suitcase, but that was gone. And I went into Kira's room. Her bed's there, TV's there, everything's in place, stereo's there, books are still there, and some of Kira's clothes are gone, and her keyboard's gone, and Kira's suitcase is not in the closet. So I'm like, what is going on? And I'm thinking to myself, I think she's gone. Wasn't sure, and I'm like, what is going on? So I'm going through all this emotions, like, okay, gather yourself. I called my dad. I'm like, hey, Dad, anything strange happened while I've been gone? And he's like, nope. I'm like, I think Jill just left. And he was quite shocked. We sat there and had a moment on the phone. And so I got off the phone with Dad, and I'm sitting there like, what in the world is going on? And my world I'm slowly starting to have a meltdown. So I'm realizing my wife has just walked out and I have no answers. So a little in the afternoon, I get a call from the bank. And like, Mr. Thomas, I'm like, yeah, what's going on? We need you to come to the bank because your wife wants off the accounts. I'm like, what? And, we have one vehicle, so she has a vehicle. I'm like, oh, well, I need to figure out how I'm going to get there, blah, blah, blah. So I went through what I needed to do to make sure I got to the bank, met with her at the bank, and it was like this weird movie type thing. Like I pulled up, didn't see the van, and noticed a vehicle pulling up behind me. She's with her aunt's husband, and he's kind of like on the racist tip. So my wife is white, and I am not white, and I'm like, what's going on? So you guys are waiting for me somewhere, looking to make sure I'm coming up, and so we go in there, handle business. I looked at her, I'm like, what's going on? And she's like, I want a divorce. I'm done. And that's all she said. I'm like, well, let's talk about this, not in the bank. Um, so we handled the business there, and I'm just kind of stunned, like, okay, Michael, we're going to get through it. On my way to the bank, I got a phone call from our pastor, Pastor Chris and his wife. They called me a little bit probably early to this whole deal. And I'm sitting there, and they look at my face, and they said, Michael, what's wrong? And I couldn't talk. And this flood of tears just was all over. Just, I was done. And Pastor Chris and his wife, they moved to Madison. They've been, they drive back and forth on the weekends to make sure they're here. But they drove from Madison to be with me by the time I got home at the bank. And I'm sitting there like, I think she's gone, Chris. And his wife, Yana, and I'm like, I think she's gone. That's all I kept saying. I couldn't put it into a thought process, but I'm like, I think she's gone. And he's like, did she leave a note? And I'm like, no. Did you guys have a conversation? I'm like, no. So this is Monday night, and I'm thinking, okay, the church, what I gotta do with the church? I got a conference coming up, and I'm really starting to lose it because it's really starting to settle in that my love bridge has just been blown up. And I'm making it back with Chris just to get some semblance, just to find some order. And when you're in a relationship or a marriage and you are one, and then you heap on life and you heap on responsibilities, and looking back at my marriage and my elders and my mentors, because I got on a phone with Chris. I'm looking, I'm shaking, and I'm like, this is nuts. What is happening? And I'm talking to Apostle Mike and Dr. Hargett. We got a conference coming up, guys. I need to have a meeting ASAP. I called Apostle Brenda up in Madison, and called my other brother from another mother, Apostle Tim, and I'm sharing with them, this is what I know thus far. She's gone. There's no note. There's no explanation, and everybody is as shocked as I am. And the first emotion that came with the love bridge exploding for me was, I have no answers, and the infusion of pain to my mental, my emotions were beginning to be like compressed, and I couldn't make sense of what has just happened. Walked around the house, went downstairs, went into the family room downstairs, went into our library. Everything's in order. Went into our school room. Everything's in order. Nothing was, out of place. Went into here at the studio, and I'm like, oh, Jill's pictures are gone. Because I have Mama's picture, or I had Mama's pictures right behind me. If you're looking on the live stream, the world map. Then there's the logo, and then there's Jasmine, and then Jill's picture is like gone. So I'm like, I'm just around the house, and like, there's nothing in the house that has Jill on it, except for pictures upstairs. Like when you come into our entry room, there's pictures of Jill, and over the fireplace, there's Jill, but Kira's pictures are down. The grandchild's picture is down. Devion's picture is down. But everything else is as if Jill never left, like she's just going to go visit relatives, or just going to go to a friend's house, or what have you. So I begin to just become a mess. And Chris is here, and Yana's here, and they're working with me to keep it together. And I could not make sense of what just happened. And Chris is asking, along with Dr. Hargett and Apostle Mike and Brenda, what led up to this? What was going on? Did you guys have an argument? I'm like, no, we had a no. Did you guys fight? I'm like, no, we had an argument, but that was like between Thanksgiving and Christmas, and Chris and Yana were a part of that. And Yana's like, this couldn't be just because of that, because that's wild if it is. I'm like, I know it's wild. And I was, I wrote Jill a letter after Thanksgiving, and nothing was said after the letter. I wrote Kira a letter, and I began to immediately go back to what life was, because I was married before to my first wife, who was Sri Lankan. And when she divorced, she took our boys and left the country. Now, I think Mel Gibson made a movie. And there's one scene in the movie that I'll never forget. It's kind of like seared in my brain. And when he's screaming, give me back my child, because the spouse took the child and left the country. And so what happened on January 4th, before our first 911 Friday night meeting and video conference with leadership, I was like having those moments all over again. Like, I don't know where Jill went to. I don't know. I called my dad, like, do you have any information? He's like, no. My mom came over, and she's like, Jill no longer wants to be married. She's done. I looked at her and said, Mom, what do you mean she no longer wants to be married? I said, this is a kingdom covenant. That's all I kept saying. And then it started to sink in. And my mother looked at me with her Portuguese mindset. And she said to me, I'm laughing now. It wasn't funny then. She said, Happy New Year. It's time to get over it and time to move on. She's not coming back to you. And I'm like, what in the world is going on? Like, all my coping mechanisms left in a span of between Wednesday morning and Friday. I was thinking of all of the flooding emotions going back to when my first wife left this country, but she left me a note and told me I would never see my boys again. She made good on that promise. Last saw Michael and Kamali January 1st, 1998, the day I came home from my 12-hour shift as patrol officer in the village of Roscoe PD, after I was forced to retire because I was unstable, because I was actually going through a separation with my ex-wife, right? And so there's all these markers in my life that I was reviewing, like, man, we just took a vacation to Orlando, and we had a beautiful drive from Tampa, getting lost back to Clearwater. And then we went from the Gulf to Clearwater, getting lost. And then we went to the Atlantic side of Florida to have a moment, and just going through all these things. And one argument, I said, there's no possible way my wife would walk out of me for one argument with you, Pastor Chris. And he's like, man, this is crazy. And so this began me spiraling down the mountain that I've been climbing. And I'm just tumbling, bumbling, rumbling down this mountain. And so for the last 3 weeks, my emotions have been all over the place for the last 3 weeks. Honestly, you can see my face right now. You know, hardly couldn't sleep, um, going through Kleenex left and right, crying, sobbing, no contact with Jill, no idea what's going on. Haven't had any adulterous affairs against her. I hope that she hasn't against me. Don't know because I don't have any answers. And so people are coming to the house, Michael, can we come to the house? I'm like, yes, please, come. I'm becoming unstable. It's just hard to be in our chateau, this blessed home that we have literally been brought to after 2 years of being homeless. No one knew that we were homeless, just kind of crazy. And I'm like, she didn't want to leave when we were homeless. We slept in the vehicle, and it was nice and tough. That was a challenge in the winter, sleeping in that vehicle. And then up and down the highways, going to meetings as if everything was copacetic with the Thomases. Oh, here comes Apostle Thomas and Prophetess Jill and little Kira. No one had a clue. And I'm sitting over the last 3 weeks like, that would have been the one time I'd have been like, yes, go to your parents' house. I'll man the fort until we find a place. And God gave us our inheritance, the chateau, January 11th, 2017, right? And the story gets better. So I lost my coping mechanisms. And I was becoming suicidal in thought. I was like, no, this is happening all over again. And Chris and Jan over here, a friend of Jill and mine called. I called him. He just came back from Israel, and he's down in Florida. And he called me as soon as he landed. He got off the plane. He's like, Michael, what's going on? That's why I shared with him what's going on, because he does high level work. And he's like, buddy, it's Ranger mode. I'm here with you. You're not going to go down with this. So he was asking me questions. Everyone's asking questions, and I'm telling my buddy who knows Jill and me from 1986. And when we had a vacation, we actually stayed with them in Clearwater. And Nathan blessed the socks off of us. And I mean, blessed the socks off of us. When you guys, hopefully Pastor Chris and his wife Yana will be on tomorrow night for part 2 of this. Because I actually called them, and I only called them and shared the blessing with them, no one else in the church, because I didn't want to make myself look as high and mighty like most ministers do. So I called him, and we were just having a fun time about the blessing that Nathan gave us. So Nathan's asking questions, and because of what he does in that world, he was asking probing questions. And like, Michael, this doesn't make sense. You got no letter, you got no communication, you have no conversation leading up to this. I'm like, no, Nathan, nothing, zero, nada. And they were wanting to get me to Florida so that I can be safe, because I was really becoming unstable. I was starting to lash out at God. Now, for those of you who have been down that road where things aren't going right for you, whatever those things are, and maybe you start to blame God. So I was going through that phase of blaming God, like, God, why would you allow her to leave like this? And one of my elders called me after leaving the house, because everyone was coming and going. Now, when I say everyone, I have just on one hand a select elect mentors and our elders, actually 2 hands, sorry. And so they're at the house, and then Brenda called me back, and she said, honey, he's our Lord and our creator, but he doesn't override free will. And I didn't want to hear that from Brenda. So I began to just have a childlike moment with Heavenly Father. I call him Papa, right? And Chris and Jan are here. He called off of work. and they were with me for 5 days, until the following Sunday. He had to get back, and then I was on the phone with Nathan. Nathan has connections all over the world, and I was letting him know, he's like, Michael, you're not going down this rabbit trail. I'm like, Nathan, I'm not doing good. I am not mentally in a good position. I am in a dark place. And I'm telling you, Night Eagles, I was in a dark place because of the investing and the investments of how I love, as I love through serving. And that's been a part of me. Um, and serving Jill. And sometimes she's not cool with that because she wants the other aspect of serving, not serving, but that's me serving my wife and loving her through serving, right? And she'd always tell me, I desire more from you. I'm like, okay, okay, I'm hearing you, but I wasn't engaging, but I'm hearing you. And yeah, we would give cards back and forth, and I got her a bouquet, which with our schedules, because like I would say the same thing. We're two ships passing in the sea, because we were coming and going with the work, with the ministry, with the church, with the schooling, with the call them kids, they're adults, right? And so I was going through these phases and not knowing what I was going through. And Brenda was telling me, Michael, you're mourning, and you're going to be grieving, and you're going to be going through betrayal, and you're going to be going through anger and bereavement, and freedom's going to come when you let go and let God handle this. And I didn't want to hear that. Hear me, I did not want to hear that. And so at some point after the 7th, 8th of January, Tim got back to me. And I'm telling you, the amount of love that is in this house of support. No one's hating on Jill. No one's talking bad about Jill. No one has answers. And I told them I got nothing bad to say about my wife. Yeah, we had our problems, but she's a good woman. And I was questioning, am I no longer lovable? So I was going through all these phases of what happens when your love bridge has exploded. Now, bear with me here because we're coming in to the 10 o'clock hour, and Night Moods, now the radio show, has to begin. So we're going to do a multi-part series. I'm going to have some special guests talking about coping skills and how to get through when your love bridge explodes. We're going to want to stay with me on this because my story is not a unique story as I thought the story that what I was living through. Over the past 2 weeks, I have heard of numbers and of numbers of spouses walking out on their marriages in the ecclesia. And a very good friend of mine, Dr. Coylette James, very good friend of mine. I reached out to her, and that's all who I reached out to. And that was on the 9th of January. Reached out to Coylette. Coylette told me, and this was late at night, because Coylette goes to bed early. Dr. Coylette goes to bed early. But she called me back. She was led by the Spirit to call me back, and she said, Michael, I need you just to listen to me. And that's all Michael did. Michael just listened. Because these are my elders. These are my brothers and sisters who are older than me. And I needed some understanding. I needed to have the wherewithal to be able to bring forth an answer for the questions that I was getting every time I would leave the house, because every time I would leave, if I wasn't with Jill, everyone was like, hey, how's the family? How's Jill doing? Now I'm like, I could barely get the sentence out before I would be a puddle of tears. And this was happening after the first week because I wasn't just secluding myself to the house, but being a private person and not even sharing, as many of you know here on Night Moods, I rarely share about the kids. And Jill would come on the podcast in the early stages, and even on the radio show, and we would have fun, and so I rarely talk about any of the private stuff. And that's for protection of Jill, protection of the kids as well. For those of you who know me, social media platforms, I don't share images of our kids. We keep everybody private, for their deal and dignity and all that. But I listened to Dr. Corlett, and she began to share with me intimate aspects of her life. And when I tell you that my story is not unique, let's load up the radio station here. There have been others that have been walked out on. I did a show last night on Night Moods, and I had a caller who called in and told me the very same thing that happened to me happened to him. Called in on a show. And I sat there playing music and just listening to everything he was saying to me. And I'm like, this is unbelievable. And then I did some research. And if you don't know, this is like through the Barna Research Company. Now, this is more Christians divorced than non-believing, according to the Barna stats. Now, population segment, they did a number of interviews. This was over 3,792 interviews of adults. 33% have been divorced. Evangelical Christians, 26% have had a divorce, and that was out of 340 interviews. Out of non-evangelical born-again Christians, these are kingdom folk. This is my people, kingdom folk. 33%. Let me see, I have to go on. And that was out of over 1,000 that they interviewed, 1,373 people that they interviewed. Uh-oh, hold on. Notional Christians, those who profess Christianity but don't dwell in weekend services, Bible studies. They just, they do what they do, but they don't have any fellowship with the body. 33% have been divorced. Number of interviews, 1,488. And I was looking at these reports and kind of going through some archives over the last week. And when I was out in Colorado to kind of get away and realize that life goes on, and life is always going to be moving present forward. And the only things that would pause is mankind. And so being at the mountains for me, and holding the promises that I received from God, I'm going to talk about this on the next episode. January 14th, our buddy, Jill and myself, Nathan, who is Jewish, sent me two messages. The first message was at 11:28. The second message, he asked to call me, which was at 9:18 on January 14th. And God, who had been silent with me, that messed me up. Because normally I can function and I can engage Father, I can experience the presence of his kingdom. But when this blew up my love bridge, all that went silent. It went like 0 dark 30. Couldn't pray. I could not even open the scriptures up. I could not even utter worship out of my mouth. Praising couldn't come out of my mouth. The only thing coming out of my mouth was, why? God, why would you allow this? And so that was one of the phases that I was going through. Now, if you have been through a divorce or a separation, and it wasn't on a equal agreement that, hey, babe, we need to step aside and we need to spend some time away so that we can kind of figure out what we're going to do with life. I'm not talking about that. Totally different. This is simply, like my daughter said, Jasmine, the fifth one out of the six, Jasmine, because I reached out to Jasmine to let her know, and she could see in my face because she's away, and so we are doing the video face what is it called on Apple, FaceTime, and she's like, Dad, what's going on? And so I went in the bedroom because everybody was in the living room on pins and needles because I was unstable. I was not myself. I was emotionally disconnected from myself, from my soul, from my spirit. And all I was thinking was, I'm not worthy to be here. I have no value. I have no importance. And Jasmine was just listening. She's like, Dad, I love you, Dad. And I'm listening to her, and she's being Jasmine because she's like Dad, and she's sharing wisdom to me. And I'm not saying anything other than I'm just trying to hold the tears back. When your kids see their parents crying, it does something to their psyche. And so she was saying in her jokingly way, she just started to joke with Dad, and I started to joke back with her, and she said, Dad, you got ghosted. And Dad doesn't know what ghosted means. I said, you want to explain this to me? Because I have no idea what you're talking about, Jazz. So she began to share what ghosted means. And so all I know is I'm getting all of this information. I just want understanding. And if you've ever been in a relationship and abandonment is abruptly set on your doorstep and you have no answers, what do you do? If you have a spouse who you love and care for and serve, and I'm not saying anything like you because marriages, you're going to have problems. Like everyone has told me, it takes work to be married. And when two people invest, and then all of a sudden, as I was listening over the past 2 weeks, Michael, this is a spiritual attack. And Nathan, who is Jewish, on the phone almost every night with me, who's just introduced to Jesus. Amazing. Out of his mouth, he said, buddy, I hate to say this, but you know me, I will never divorce truth from you. I said, go ahead and say it, Nathan. You're under attack. And this shift from self-blaming to blaming God to grieving, and you don't just go from one to the next to the next. I mean, depending on your relationship, you will simply ride this wave, and this wave will take you back to mourning. This wave will take you to anger. And I'm not a person to destroy anything. And Father's taught me how to be a steward over his resources. And so if you were to get a tour of the chateau, like the ministers and my mentors who have been here, and one of the elders said to me, Patricia, she said to me this, Michael, you're a steward. And so you're honoring God by exactly what you're doing. Because I would tell myself, God, you have not told me to get rid of her stuff. Now, my Portuguese mother, Lord bless her heart, it's like every couple of days, are you getting rid of the stuff yet? Throw the stuff away. Just get rid of it. So we had that conversation today. And I said, Mom, I need you to stop telling me that. And she's just, she's being mom. My Portuguese mom. My Portuguese side of my mom. She's like, you just need to get rid of it. I said, Mom, when God tells me to get rid of Jill's and Kira's stuff, then I'll get rid of it. But until then, it's staying right where it is until she comes back. Now, you just heard me say until she comes back, because there's hope. Now, the next episode, I'm going to share why there's hope, because on the 14th of January, as I was telling you, and through Nathan, my Jewish brother, who I went to high school with, Jill and I went to high school together, through Nathan, revelation came. But back to this wave. This wave will toss you through some changes. This wave is going to mess your emotional state up, your state of mind, your mindset. And the wave comes because crisis has impacted my territory. Crisis impacts your territory. Not only it impacts your territory, but it hits your environment. And in your environment is where the people are at. And then it hits the atmosphere. It changes the atmosphere. And in Ephesians chapter 6, I'm reminded of this. Ephesians chapter 6 says this. Let's see if I can get there. Ephesians 6 says this. You ready? Oh, yeah. Such things of life here when you're dealing with all technology. I tell you guys, sorry about this. I know where I can go with it, but I want to just make sure that I have everything I could possibly have in order. All right. I want to make sure I have this right. As a I got to watch the screen here because we're live on the radio, and I've not introduced the radio show yet. So, our fight. Why does it take me to Corinthians? This is so funny. Logos is messing up with me right now. I don't understand. All right. Ephesians says this. Because when Nathan told me this, and Nathan was sharing with me what everyone's been telling me, this is a spiritual attack. Nathan called one of his friends to get here on January 15th. He showed up on my door because Nathan was scared that I was going to, in fact, harm myself. Because I was just that unstable, because I was one. And when you separate, Tim taught me this. His wife died. Tim's wife died. And I'm kind of all over the place because you got to set up the presentation before we get to break down how to help you cope and how to handle when your love bridge is destroyed. Jill and I were there for Tim. Tim is like one of my closest elder brothers who God connected me to in 2012, September 2012. No, January 2012, excuse me. And Jill and I were there for Tim, just as a small army of brothers and sisters to just be there to walk with him as Tim's wife died of stage 4 cancer. And even when Jill and I were homeless, he was going through the throes of being separated and having to tell the doctors at that moment when there could be no more fight for life. I remember being on the conference call and the pain and hurt and agony, and Tim having to say to all of us and his kids, he's got 6 kids, 6 awesome kids between him and Cinderella. When we can no more fight for life, then Cinderella will be at rest. I called Cinderella. Tim took on that nickname as well. And so he began to talk to me about the separation when you're one in your marriage and the knife comes to separate. You're one, you come to the marriage as 2 unique individuals, and you come to the marriage as it is written to be one. And so you have this blending of uniqueness and the struggle of what it means to be one, because it is a struggle to be one. And so Tim began to explain this, and I've never heard it explained because I've never had to walk with any person on this earth as close as I am and was to Cinderella and Tim, as the adopted brother from a different mother. When the knife comes to separate, it is a physical, spiritual, mental, soul pain, and you feel the separation. And he said, I don't know how else to describe it. And so Tim and I talked about this last week. And I remember when Tim told me that, I had no answer for Tim because Jill is not dead. Jill is still here, and I'm in love with Jill, and you know, we're married, right? So I was talking to Tim last week, and we brought this conversation right full circle because I said, Tim, I have heart pain and I have emotional pain, but I got soul pain. And he said, Michael, now I understand the words you told me at the moment that I was separated from my wife. Because I said, I don't remember what I told you, Tim, because there was so much that I was doing. And he said, Michael, you said to me that I don't know what I can say or do because I've never been in this situation before. Now, God has blessed Tim in such an awesome, miraculous way. Tim is remarried to an awesome woman. And Tim said to me last week, Michael, I don't know what to say. There is no amount of faith that could have brought my wife, my first wife, Cinderella, back. There were no amount of prayers that could bring her back to the land of living from stage 4 cancer in 90% of her body. I knew when I saw the look in her face that it was well and she was ready to go home. And I couldn't handle it. And I remember thinking about that moment when Tim said he couldn't handle it. He was where I was 2 weeks ago. I couldn't handle it because I could describe the soul pain as a separation. When Jill left with no answers, no letter, no questions, no conversation. And I realized after January the 14th, this burden was lifted quick, fast, in a hurry right off of me. And then Sunday, when Nathan called me and he said, Michael, this is a spiritual attack. This makes no natural sense. And then he said to me what everybody else has been saying. You're not the only one. And everybody I've been talking to has had this same story in their background of life. A spouse walking out on them with no answers, no understanding, and you're supposed to deal with it. And I don't know how you can deal with it based upon someone else's situation. And so our relationships are all unique. And this is why this is a multi-series event, because you can't just put all this into an hour. And I want to keep you guys on the journey with me, because I know there may be some of you watching this. Some of you may be watching this, and you have a similar story, just from a different village. You're on the same highway, and you crossed the bridge, and it blew up in front of you. And so you got to put the car in reverse, and you got to get to that back on the high ground so that you don't implode with the bridge, right? So what do we do? What are some of the things that you have done? I'm going to share with you some of the things that I've been doing. Excuse me. Get a drink here. Coping skills. Trusting God when you can't trust yourself. Believing in God when you can't believe in yourself. Truth. See, there's levels of truth, but there is one truth, and I had to return to truth, and it happened July. Why I keep saying July? Interesting. January the 14th. It happened for me. And however you cope, I keep thinking of the journey, this pathway that we all are on, this life journey, this pathway, this road that is called life. And speaking particularly to our married couples, I'll talk to you guys. Because you take this journey as like driving in a vehicle. One's driving, one's in the passenger seat. And when we're driving with our spouses, one is actually has control of the wheel, but yet at the same time, our spouses are help navigating, having a conversation, looking out the window. So they're part of the journey in the vehicle. So much is the same thing in the marriage. But when the love bridge explodes, when that relationship bridge explodes, and everything is fragmented, even down to the thought. And for a better part of 2 weeks, it just got for me just to breathe. It was just good enough for me to breathe for a better part of 2 weeks. And that was making my life as simple as life could be for me without doing something drastic, was just to breathe. Nathan, Michael, I need you to breathe. Brenda, just breathe. Don't think about the hurt. Just breathe. We'll deal with the hurt. Dr. Coylette, baby, you just need to breathe. It is easy to say that, but I need you to breathe right now. You need to just breathe the breath of life. Pastor Chris, Yana, do what you tell us to do, Apostle. It's hard medicine when you have to actually take the medicine yourself in the middle of a crisis. Ephesians chapter 6 is something I want to share because everyone is saying the same thing. And this is now on the radio show, we've been talking about this. And there are just so many others who are in the middle of their bridge, their relationship bridge, and their life bridge. Now, I'm not talking about the cause and effects because our marriages, we have all responsibility. And that is something that Tim told me that I've done. He said, if you don't own it, you can't give it to God. And Michael, you have to own it. I had to own all my faults with Cinderella. And so for the past couple of weeks, that's what I've been doing. I've been owning it. I've been owning, the dream that I received back in the fall when I told leadership. And I shared the dream and wrote it down. It's actually on my desk right out there. Spirit of Wisdom told me to rinse my words before I speak. And a few of them at the table looked at me like, what does that mean? And I knew what that meant. And it brought me back to law enforcement. It brought me back to being in the Navy. For me, truth is truth, and I don't bend truth. But yet with my spouse, I need to soften how I bring truth to her. And it brought me back to what Tim was saying. Michael, if you don't own it, you can't give it to God. He won't take what you don't own. So I want to share that one nugget, what I just said right there. And every one of us has a responsibility to our relationship. Every one of us. And so I've been going down that rabbit trail. Michael, what did you do on this day? Because genuinely, I was good for Jill, and genuinely, Jill was good for me, genuinely speaking. I'm telling you, Jill and I, because of her nature, what she came out of 24 years, when we would argue, I would just tell her, I can't do yelling because of my nature, of my background as a little dude growing up in a heated, extreme domestic house of domestic violence, domestic assault, domestic abuse, even domestic rape. To me. But watching my mom and my dad go through it like Mike Tyson and Evander Holyfield when I was a little dude. And I'm the oldest of 3 boys. And so you can't give to God what you don't own. And that played with my mind. And maybe that's one of the coping mechanisms, coping skills I want to share with you on this episode. that whatever and wherever you are at on the bridge, and maybe you're arguing on the bridge, maybe you're getting to, because the bridge takes us to our destination. The roads of life are part of the assignments of life. And in your marriage, you will come to these bridges in life. And sometimes those bridges aren't the most stable bridges. But what happens when that bridge is shattered? You can't go backwards because you need that bridge to cross to get to the other side with your spouse. And the amount of praying and the amount of fasting and the amount of just blaming self, blaming God, because, hey, I'm like you all as well. I was having a tirade two weeks ago in this beautiful, peaceful home while everybody was gone, because everyone had to go back to their lives and everyone had to do what they need to do in order to survive and handle business. And so we're not immune just because we're ministers, holy men of God. We're not immune to the destructions of spiritual warfare. I'm sorry. He comes to see who he can kill, seek, and destroy. And even in the book of Job, many don't understand that Job wasn't even in the courthouse of God. But as the records say, Satan and those angels of the Lord appeared before God's throne, but Job wasn't there. So Father ruled on Job's behalf, and he ruled to test Job's faith. And in that ruling, he gave the authority for Satan to do what needed to be done, except for not touch Job. And this happened twice, chapters 1 and chapters 2, when you go back and review Job. So I'm saying that because Christopher was reminding me, he's like, Michael, my dad went through this. And I did Pastor Chris's, I shouldn't say I did. I was one of the ministers who performed the eulogy at Pastor Chris, dad's Apostle Daring's funeral, homegoing service. And so knowing all of this, that we're not immune. And then when you're doing any elect work, any elect kingdom work, when you're performing God's mission, his assignments, you are the bullseye for Satan and his demons. And I have a covenant that Jill and I carry. We have the audio version of the covenant. I might share it with you on the next episode that you can hear the covenant. I'm not sure. I got to be mindful of what I share and what I don't share, because I'm not to, on these platforms, cast my pearls before swine. So I won't be doing all that. So I will see. But we carry a covenant, and this happened on November 13th of 2013. The covenant that happened in Chicago, when the two elder prophetess came and sought me out to bring forth the Rhema word of Abba Father to my life. And on January 14th of this year, Nathan told me in that first message, I have instructions to give you from God that you are to return your destiny. And in that covenant, the word destiny is in that covenant. And so all that to say, Ephesians chapter 6 right here. Now remember, you can't give to God what you don't own. And I have been working ownership and my responsibilities, but owning everything that I have done, but not re-victimizing myself, because Tim has been with me. Don't you dare go down that re-victimizing yourself. If you didn't do it, don't own it. But the things that I've done, or I'm at fault at, or the things that you have done, or the things that you are at fault at in your marriage, own it. And whatever that means for you, then you fill in that blank. But you can't give to God what you don't own. And as everyone in my fellowship has been saying to me, Michael, this is a spiritual attack. And many of you don't know, I'm also dealing with achalasia. I've had 2 emergency surgeries. because food has issues going to my stomach. Crazy. I've had this conversation with Father. I don't get it. And then over the span of this last 2 weeks, tell me this is my thorn in the flesh. So my sphincter, they've had to perform 2 surgeries to keep it, put a flap and keep it open so that the food can go in. And it might be starting to fail again. And I told my doctor, I had actually called up, they left a message for him to call because they want to do a transplant, an esophageal transplant, the craziest thing. And I'm like, no, Father's going to heal this. This is not going to be going underneath the knife again. And the call was recorded. And so doctor called me back and said, Mr. Thomas, I need to share this with you. And the nurses weren't on, it was just him. And he said to me, I can respect your hesitancy of what we're suggesting for the next procedure. I understand it. And in you, there's light. I see that. And I'm talking to you not as a medical physician. I'm talking to you just to talk to you. And so he was having a conversation. I'm listening, and I'm like, okay, great. And I'm thinking, are you going to show me some bad news? And he said, I could be disbarred, lose my license. And he said to me, you're having a spiritual attack. And then I fell apart and began to tell him what was going on with my marriage. And I did not know that this man was born again. And he shared some intimate matters with him. And he said, Ephesians chapter 6, you're not wrestling against Joe. And this is going to change how you pray for Joe. So I'm sharing this with you before I get off here and bring you to the next episode. I'm sharing this with you. That your argument, your fighting, your bridge being detonated is not your spouse. Indirectly, listen what I'm saying. Ephesians chapter 6. I'm going to get through here, and then I'm going to bid you adieu, because I got a radio show I'm late for. Finally, become strong in the Lord and in the might of his strength. Now, I'm going to back this up, because Paul is teaching to the church in Ephesus. And I'm going to be getting right back into the words of Jesus tomorrow, or on the next episode, which will be tomorrow, 9 o'clock, right here, live stream. Be strong in Abba and in the power of his strength. That's what the doctor was telling me. And he was saying this very slow, articulating his Italian words as best as he could. And I was tracking with him. Look at my eyes, you guys. Tracking with him. He did not know what was going on. Out of his mouth, he is saying, because of this procedure that I don't want to have, and he is saying you're under a spiritual attack. There is a principality coming after you because of the assignment God has called you to. Blew me away. Just happened after July 14th Rhema word from Father. I'm going to talk about that on part 2. Put on the full armor of God, verse 11, so that you may be able to stand against the strategies of the devil. Because, and this is where he said, I'm going to share this with you, and then my nurse is going to call you to schedule your appointment. Because our struggle is not against blood and flesh. Our struggle is not against people. Your struggle in your marriage is not against your spouse. Now, you're probably thinking or looking at me right now like, no, you're wrong on that one, because XYZ, ABC, and fill in the blank, because you don't know my spouse. She's done this to me. She's done this to me, right? Because our struggle is not against the natural flesh or the blood that is in the natural flesh. That's the people, the environment. But the struggle is against the spiritual rulers, against the spiritual authorities, against the spiritual forces of wickedness, even in the heavenly places. Then he stopped talking. Now you're looking at me because this is my position on the phone. He said, Michael, you're going to be okay. And I'll talk to you soon. End of phone call. You cannot give to God what you don't own. The spiritual rulers, the spiritual authorities, the principalities that are operating in an unseen realm that you can't see right outside your door in the realm of the spirit are against you because you believe in Jesus and you commune with Abba Father and you cooperate with the power of the Holy Spirit. And if the enemy can destroy your marriage, if you're not the one who's destroying your own marriage, self-sabotaging your marriage, hopefully that is not the case. But if that's the case, we're going to talk about that on the next episode too. But the enemy, if he can destroy the house, then he believes falsely that he has a foothold. And now he's weaponized himself because she walked out of my marriage. And as I have been listening to my mentors and my elders and our ministry team and just a few that are in my fellowship, this is happening to many in the ecclesia, in the body. So I'm not talking about those in the world. I'm talking about the ecclesia. You can't give to God what you don't own. If you don't understand what I'm saying, I'm going to say it real slow because I had to tell Tim, can you please repeat that to me? So I'm not talking down to you or being condescending. You cannot give to God what you don't own. If your bridge, the love bridge, the relationship bridge is imploded, has blown up, that means he has put a heat-seeking missile and bullseye separated you from your spouse. Spiritual attacks are real. And so now you have to disengage to get a better scope of what you're dealing with. And you have to have truth to fight this fight. And that truth is kingdom truth and the spirit of wisdom and the spirit of counsel and the spirit of strength. Isaiah 11:2. Those 7 spirits that stand before the throne of grace. So I'm going to get a little deep on the next episodes what I'm getting you at. But you cannot give to God what you don't own. If you own it, then you can trade it and give it to God, and he can do something with it. So that's the first coping. And then we're going to make sense out of the blame game. We're going to make sense out of the denial. We're going to make sense out of grieving, healthy to grieve, mourning. And if your spouse is taken back, grieving. Bereaving. Empathy, apathy, self-sabotaging, re-victimizing, getting through instability, being unstable emotionally. We're going to get through this. And I'm going to be sharing with you the next episode how to actually get through coping. Getting the right tools that's going to help you, as I say on the show, navigate and manage and deal. Because we got to make some deals in this. Deal through this crisis. That means the bridge has to be repaired. But how can you repair the bridge when you're in a weakened state? I can do all things through Jesus Christ who strengthens me. And Father will send at the mediation of Jesus, who's at the right hand of the throne of grace, He will send to your pathway truth healers, deliverance makers, to help you get to your knees, to help you stand, or to help you begin crawling out of that cave that you may have placed yourself into, or you took a hit from a projectile that destroyed the bridge and it took you to the base of the mountain, the other side of the bridge. And this is a military thing here. See, when you take a hit and you're in crisis mode and the medics are called, they want you to breathe if you don't have any extreme emergent situation going. They want you to breathe. And you'll hear, just breathe. And you look at me, look at my face. You see me right now? You look at me right now? I just need you to breathe. Because you'll hyperventilate. Your emotions are unstable. Everything about you is unstable when you've taken a hit to your relationship bridge. You see me right now? I get it. I understand it. All you can do is just breathe. And the truth is going to be coming from your creator. And yes, you're going to have moments where you want to blame him. See, we all do that. Wrong or right, that's what kids do. We don't understand, so we lash out. If you have kids in this life that you have been party to bring into this earth, help bring into this earth, your kids are going to have that moment of not understanding when you tell them no. When you're doing something for their best interest, or when you're chastising them, they're going to say, I hate you. They're going to say, they're going to mutter those words. But they're doing all that because they don't understand the bond of the parent to the child. I'm not talking friends to the child. I'm talking the bond of a parent to the child. So in the same way, it is that way with Father. And so the immediate hit and detonation of the bridge takes you on an emotional roller coaster, and the fight for life begins at that moment. The fight for life begins at that moment. Okay, I've been babbling for too long. I'm going to have hopefully some special guests on next episode, because you're listening to a simulcast on all our live streaming. 126 Genesis Media. Relationships, Marriage Shattered, Part 1. Now, beginning of this episode, now, if you haven't emailed nightmoodshdq@gmail.com, or you can email 126thegenesis@gmail.com. There is this book right here, free gift, to say thank you for listening from our partners at Voice of the Martyrs. It is a 377-page called Extreme Devotion. So put in the subject, Extreme Devotion. The first 10 individuals that do so, because I don't have any idea who's emailed, but I can find out. We're going to get you this book right here. Okay. Now, we'll see what happens on the next episode, but right now for tonight, it's 10:46 Central Standard Time, up until midnight. This book, if you want this book, a devotional from our friends at Voice of the Martyrs, I want to put this in your hands, as well as the smaller book right here. It's called the Life Book. These are from our partners. Part 2 is going to be on the next episode. Hopefully I have a couple special guests who are going to be helping me break down to help you find some coping skills from the throne room. That means deliverance is our portion. Salvation is our portion. Healing is our portion. But what do you do when you're weak and you don't want it? Sometimes you got to force feed children. Be right here again. Tomorrow night, 9 o'clock, 1 hour. Got a little long-winded, went over, but I had kind of set this up for you. Tomorrow night, be here at 9 o'clock. We're going to opening up all the live streams again. Thank you for watching here on the Facebook, the YouTube channels. Appreciate you guys. LinkedIn, thank you for you guys watching. If you have any questions, this episode, nightmoodshdq@gmail.com, or send a question to 126 the Genesis @gmail.com as well. Ephesians chapter 6, verse 11. And we're going to piggyback off of that. And the first coping mechanism of truth that was shared with me: you cannot give to God, our Father, what you don't own. Pray that makes sense to you. Before I go, because I really got to get on the show, I want to share this with you. Love yourself as you love others, and be a blessing to yourself as you bless others. And that means receive who God brings to you as a way of loving yourself. Receive who God brings to you as a way of blessing yourself. That's my time for now. Remember, 10 emails, you can get a free book. That's a way of saying thank you. Shipping and handling, you got to pay for, but you get a free book, 2 books. If you're in the United States or Puerto Rico, it's an email. Put in the subject matter, extreme devotion. Thank you to our supporters at Logos 10. Talk to you guys on the next episode, and see you on the next live stream on part 2, Manifest in the Way, Marriage, Relationships Shattered.